Alrighty, so the next, I guess you might say, general cause. We're talking about general causes of World War One. By the way, some basics here. Um, World War One lasted from 1914 to 1918. All right, when there was an armistice signed, and then 1919, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and the United States entered the war in 1917, and we'll talk about that uh, later on why they did that. But we talked a little bit about nationalism. We talked a little bit about militarism. These are real basic concepts and should be easy to understand. Also, something that's often overlooked in textbook is this idea of fatalism. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was this movement, you might say, of social Darwinists, okay, or people that believed in social Darwinism. And basically, they applied the ideas of Darwin and the theory of evolution and survival of the fittest, all right, and applied it to society. And this is what a lot of people in the social sciences still do. Um, Not all, but they kind of apply a lot of scientific ideas to society. Okay, not as much as they used to, but that was something that was really big in the late 1800s. Social Darwinism and this idea of survival of the fittest, all right, and how that propagates a stronger species. And so, as a result, this social Darwinism in the late 19th century taught that violent struggle was an inevitable part of life. And this, like I said, bred this idea of fatalism and this idea that war, all right, that no one could really prevent war. All right, war was inevitable, and if war was inevitable, you might as well be as prepared as possible. And of course, this encouraged this even more so. Okay. Um, Actually, we could let's see, look at this right now, or oh, not yet. Okay, another cause of general cause of World War One was imperialism. What is imperialism? We talked about that in last week in some of those lectures. Okay, and I didn't really get into it too much. And if you were a little bit confused by my lectures, don't worry about it. Everybody is confused sometimes when you're dealing with American imperialism because there's so many different ways, different lenses through which you can view imperialism and American imperialism. But a more clear-cut example of imperialism is basically what the Europeans did in Africa in the 1800s. And you know, pretty much what they did was they went into Africa and they divided up Africa amongst themselves. That's why if you go into West Africa, you will see or you will find a lot of people who speak French, and Central Africa as well, because the French took that area over. There's a lot of other areas in which people speak English, for example, even Portuguese. All right, because Europeans went in there and pretty much divided Africa and created, and this is very important. They created these sort of arbitrary borders, and these arbitrary and within these borders, these arbitrary borders, they created nation states. Now, in Europe, Germany was made up mainly of German speaking people. Sure, in the south of Germany, there were more Catholics, but they were all Christian, mostly Protestant. But they had a lot of the shared ideas, shared beliefs. And this is something that happened in Europe much more organically, okay, naturally. It just sort of evolved in that way. Whereas this concept of, I want you to understand this concept of the nation state. The modern nation state is something that's very new in terms of history. And so when Europeans went into Africa and started dividing up Africa and creating these little nation states and colonies, in order to basically get their resources, it caused a lot of problems, and still there's a lot of problems. There were a lot of these borders that were created with no consideration of the different people within those borders, and that there may be some tension that was there, different cultures and all of that. And so, how did this help lead to World War One? Well, when the Europeans were kind of dividing up Africa, and when they were really kind of went on this what's some I heard one historian call it an imperialistic binge around the world. All right, that created tensions between the European countries because they were really trying, fighting over these resources around the world. There's specific examples. I'm not going to get too much into that. I just want you to know that imperialism and what was going on at that time was definitely one of the things that created some of that tension. Another thing is that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we see very poor leadership in a lot of the countries that would become involved um, in the war. For example, um, in Germany, where you had the chancellor. I think I said prime minister earlier. Usually he's known as a chancellor, Bismarck. Well, Bismarck in Germany there was a monarch. Okay, they didn't call it a king; they called him a Kaiser. It was Kaiser Wilhelm the First, and they were pretty, in some ways, pretty good team. What Bismarck did was he pretty much used bribery, intimidation, the exaggeration of the French menace, to crush any kind of opposition to Kaiser Wilhelm the First. Now, what he did when he did that, however, is create a situation when Kaiser Wilhelm the Second took over after Kaiser Wilhelm the First died. Kaiser Wilhelm the Second just was pretty much an idiot, and so, but because Bismarck made the Kaiser so powerful, all right, it really kind of created Bismarck's demise, because what Kaiser Wilhelm II did, and I'm not going to ask you this, too much. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail or ask you to go into too much detail on the test about this, but what Kaiser Wilhelm II ended up doing, because Bismarck um, would kind of argue with him, he fired Bismarck. And this was a bad mistake. Okay, this was a bad mistake because Bismarck was extremely competent. And then what Kaiser Wilhelm II did was he just surrounded himself with yes men or sycophants. Basically, these are people that just, kiss ass. Okay. Um, anyway, we will see that, if you get more in detail, you'll see that Kaiser Wilhelm the Second of Germany was pretty much an idiot. Also, the leadership in France, in Russia at this time was I'd say in the 19 teens, was at an all-time low. And so this was again, one of the general causes of World War One. And this is all basic stuff that, just using your common sense, you could have kind of figured out some of this stuff. Now, something that maybe is not as much of just pure common sense, and that is the alliance system. And basically, what Bismarck wanted to do was he wanted to create a situation where Germany, and this is Europe in 1914, right before the war began, and what Bismarck wanted to do in the late 1800s, before he was fired, was to constantly isolate France. So Germany would always make sure that he was friends with Russia, because what he did not want to do, is get in between France and Russia, because you don't want to have to fight on two fronts this way. But he had also had some alliances with the United Kingdom and blah, blah, blah. However, once Bismarck is fired, Kaiser Wilhelm II ends the amiable relationship that Germany had, that Bismarck was trying to nurture, you might say, with Russia. Basically, what Bismarck was doing was he was loaning Russia money to kind of keep their economy going, and in return, Russia signed kind of this alliance, basically saying if somebody attacks you, we'll be on your side. But then once Kaiser Wilhelm II takes over, gets rid of Bismarck, he stops this loan program going to Russia, and then France looks at the kind of this opportunity, and France creates a relationship with Russia. So by 1914, you basically had an alliance system. You had the Triple Entente that was made up of France, the United Kingdom, and Russia. Now, this is very important. I want y'all to remember this, okay? This is definitely something that you need to know. Triple Entente. I think I'll probably put that as an identification. All right. It was an alliance system between the United Kingdom, France, and Russia. All right. Basically stating that if one is attacked, then the others would come to their aid. And they signed the Triple Entente right around, right before World War One. A few years before World War One, if I'm correct. I don't know the exact date that it was signed. It was kind of a series um, of alliances or treaties, you might say, that eventually resulted in the Triple Entente. And the significance of the Triple Entente was that it isolated Germany. Okay, it isolated Germany. Germany found itself between France and Russia. And like I said, I wish I remembered the exact date that it was signed, but it was several years, a few years before 1914. Okay, I want to say 1907, 1900, something like that, maybe even before that. But like I said, it was kind of a series of treaties that resulted in it. And like I said, the significance of this was that it isolated Germany and made Germany feel more threatened, and that will also lead to some things that led to World War One. Now, there was also what was known as the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and even though you don't see it on this map, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put like some little lines here, and Italy. So you had Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. That was part of the Triple Alliance. And this Triple Alliance, when the war started, Italy did not go to war on the side of what was known as the Central Powers. You see that right here, because they were in the center. All right, because they felt that this alliance was a defensive alliance, and they felt that Germany was the one that was being the aggressor, and eventually Italy joined sides with the Triple Entente. Okay, but the significance of the alliance system, or systems if you want to say it that way, is that once Germany went to war, then Austria-Hungary went to war, once France went to war, then the United Kingdom went to war, so it created this kind of chain reaction. Okay? All right, so we're going to end there. And I have some more for you coming up.